Yeah. You already know. It's Kappa Kappa. Young millionaires. The general. Okay, I wake up every day. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. Every day I'm getting paid. Man, this life is going great. I just wanna celebrate. I made it in and out of state. $1 million in the case. I got it hidden somewhere safe. I multiply all my millions and really I am extremely wealthy. I distributed my millions with my family. This is just the beginning. I purchased a Lamborghini, driving around the city. Believe me, you haven't seen me. Made it through all the struggle, defeated all of my rivals. I was never entitled, I had to fight for survival. Man, this life is amazing, it's crazy that well we made it. Now I'm living my dreams and I'm burning, just getting started. I made it through the struggle back when I was very worried. Now I'm chilling, get my condo, Lamborghinis and Bugatti. I know you in a hurry, but I promise don't be worried. When you see me in a club, I probably got enough to party. I'm a multi-millionaire, getting money everywhere. I ain't tripping on nobody, I just came to celebrate. Yeah, we got the party popping, got the general over here, throwing money in the air, cause we get it every day. I multiply all my millions, now me and my people winning. Moving city to city, I promise that you will see me driving a Lamborghini, but this is just the beginning. $1 million Bugatti, I'm stacking money in the ceiling. Multiply all my millions, now me and my people winning. Moving city to city, I promise that you will see me driving a Lamborghini, but this is just the beginning. $1 million Bugatti, I'm stacking money in the ceiling.
The Truth Podcast, live from the grill. We're here with Big John. We got Nikki G. Nikki G was lost, but she was found. What's up, guys?
Hey, I missed you guys while I was out. It's good to see you.
I was a lot of different current events and stuff going on in life.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of truths to talk about.
Absolutely.
I think we can figure out between a gun and a taser here today.
What happened there, John? It's something I'm always loved. What's the gun that taser? Something you going on?
Okay, so a couple days ago, a 20-year-old African American, he was stopped because now this is what they're saying is that he had an air freshener obstructing the view of his rearview mirror. Okay, young African American, coincidentally and tragically, in the suburb of Minneapolis, the same place where the George Floyd trial is taking place. So they pull him over. They realize he has a warrant for a misdemeanor. They try to subdue him. He doesn't have a weapon, and they're wrestling with him or whatever. And a female officer who's been on the force for 26 years, she takes out her firearm and she's saying taser, 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 except for she shot him with this Glock and mortally wounded him. He drove off and wrecked and died. So she resigned today. So that's a positive thing, but there's been protests in the streets. They set up a curfew for 7:00. They've been doing tear gas and
we're back again.
Well, and then in Virginia over the week, this happened back in February, but because of the lawsuit, the video just was released of a lieutenant in the Army. He was pulled over. He drove like about a half a mile while the lights were on, and he wasn't driving at an erratic speed. He waited to pull over in a lighted gas station.
Right.
He pulled over. The cop interpreted it like he was fleeing him. So he has weapons drawn. The guy has his hands outside the window. They end up pepper spraying him. They drag him to the ground, you know, and they said they couldn't see his license plate, but he had it in the back window. It was a brand new vehicle. So unfortunately, these things keep happening. And it's not like they're new. It's just we get to see them more because of lapel camera footage, or, you know, I think Will Smith said racism isn't getting worse. It's just getting filmed.
Wow.
You know, that's crazy shit. But I'm gonna kind of change up, I'm gonna switch gears about this. And we're gonna talk about, this is kind of gonna go on kind of a weird line. But I'm gonna talk about pillars in your life, right? And what is the definition of a pillar in your life? And this is a question for you guys. And then I'm gonna kind of give us a quick statement. What do you think a pillar in your life is, Nikki G?
Before I met you, I think that was like more of like I don't know, like a structure. You know, I think my pillar growing up was school, because it was the most consistent thing in my life.
Let me change that. Human pillar.
A human pillar.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I feel like that can come in family. It can come in parental. It can come in mentors. Sometimes I've had a younger person than me that was like so just like a pillar in my life.
What does it mean to you? What's...
To me, it's something that is like unmovable. No matter what happens in our life, no matter what goes on, no matter what circumstance, no matter where I'm at, I feel like the pillar meant is like stability, something that no matter what was there and solid, you know. That's what
like
I
that.
feel.
How about you, John?
Well, just a pure definition from a structural standpoint, I'm looking, and, you know, you can't see it. Well, maybe you can over Nikki's shoulder. There's a pillar over her, I guess, her left shoulder. Mm-hmm. That's holding up the building right there. Yep. That's a load bearing structure that has to hold it up, and is so crucial to the engineering of it. Now you translate that to your own personal life. I mean, my parents have always been pillars in my life. Once I had children, they became pillars because they became reasons that I wanted to make them proud of me and also work hard so that they can flourish. You know?
I love that.
You know.
So let me open up with this statement that I made, okay? Pillars in your life will never be swayed by a small rainstorm or strong wind. They will be left standing in your honor no matter what. Never allow people to turn on the pillars that they were for you. And what I wanted to touch about that, what I meant by that is, how many times do you hear, like, you had a pillar in your life, they make a mistake, and all of a sudden they want to be brought down, like it was like, okay, we're a stick. And when you gave that definition, it was so powerful for me, because that pillar is going to take a tremendous impact in order to take its movement or shift it out of its place. That has to be severe. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, how many times have we in our lives had a pillar, they make a mistake, and we're almost ashamed to talk about them, or we just forget about them and say, no way. And it was crazy because I got invited to Cafecito de Colon, right? And I gave my story again, right? You got to hear my story, how I came up, and, you know, like some homage that I gave. And one of the things that brought this to my mind was, I said, two big pillars in my life growing up as a young man was Al Showman. I brought him on the show, and Mick Sopin. And one of the things that people don't realize is, like, Mick Sopin, I learned a lot from him. I actually looked up to him. I saw very kind man, owned the Tao Spa, made a mistake, ended up going to jail, got himself stuck with drugs, and he went from this huge bodybuilder, like probably the most defined physique I had ever seen. Al was the largest man I had ever seen. Mick was probably the most chiseled, and was like that 12 months out of the year. And all of a sudden, he goes through this stuff, and everybody was like, I'm going to disassociate myself from this whole individual. When, I mean, this guy was a mid-USA champion, phenomenal stuff. But for me, it did not sway. It doesn't sway right now. Like, to me, I don't really give a crap what people's opinions or the mistake that he did. But for me, it's like, ultimately, without that individual, I wouldn't have been I've been like care so much about the actual aesthetics of being a bodybuilder or like with that level. So and what I learned and even like some of the abs tricks. So for me, in that point of the pillar in fitness, that's what I'm going to judge him by. That's all I care about. I wasn't caring about what his decisions were in other life. I'm just saying the pillar in fitness, you can't take that from him, right? Nikki, for us, another individual coming out of northern New Mexico is probably going to be controversial as shit, was like Tommy Rodella, right? A lot of people, you know, did he act bad what he did? I don't know. That's not my thing. But a very good man to me when I was in college. You know, we had a class together. I used to help him and stuff in math, but just a great guy to meet. So I couldn't have a negative opinion. And so, like, I think about that. I don't, as an individual and as I've gotten older, I don't allow people's opinions or what anyone cares about for me to be like, how was that person to me? Was he a pillar? Was he what? But ultimately, I can't be swayed on that. And I think that's something that all of us in life, we have to feel that. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the article, was it like a little article that about Tom Brady's son being bullied? And there's and those kids saying, you know what? The only reason I'm your friend is because your dad's Tom Brady. And then Tom told his son, well, the only reason people like me is because I'm Tom Brady. And then the little boy says, well, Dad, you are Tom Brady. And he says, no, I'm Tommy. So when I thought about that, I was like, holy crap, right? Here I built this persona of the general, but to most people who knows, if you know me, you know me by something else. And at the end of the day, it's so crazy because how much pressure are people going out there in today's society? They have to live up to some persona or some pillar, and then you're not liked because of that, or you can't be liked for who you are, or maybe show that, you know what, you're vulnerable. But who cares? Because the people that care about you aren't going to change their opinion no matter if you fall and stumble, make a mistake, whether you're a pillar or you're a pillar in the making. Because you might be a pillar in the making, doesn't mean you always got to be a pillar. And I think that is something that really stands out to me. I want you guys to share, is there anybody in your lifetime that was a pillar that made a mistake, but you haven't changed the opinion, or maybe you did, right? Look, we're not perfect in life, right? Whoever has followed the Bible and known the Bible stories, the Apostle Paul denied Jesus 3 times, right? And Jesus said, you're going to deny me. And imagine, Jesus to him was a monster pillar. But out of fear, he denied him because he was afraid that they were going to kill him. The Romans were going to kill him, even though he knew that Jesus was a God. So think about that. So we can't really be too hard on ourselves when we've done that. But I try my best, no matter what, whether you won or lost. And I think what Brian was talking about is that we talked about that we've been in each other's lives at our high vibrations and low. And no matter what, at the low, in races that Brian has lost, I was like, this guy's still one of my best friends. He's a brother. He's like my brother. I fuck with him. He's older than me, but I'm like, you're like the little brother. You're like the nerd, dude. So I gotta whoop your ass. And we laugh, but no matter what, I was standing outside that bedroom when he took that loss, and I'm like, I'm here. We're gonna get up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change to me who you are, whether you're this official or you're Brian. At the end of the day, you're still a pillar in my life. You're my spiritual brother, and that's the pillar that I pull in for him. He's the individual who actually brought me back close to my faith when I had so many questions where I was like, I don't know about that. You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So those kind of pillars, I think, have you ever had any type of individual that's a pillar in your life? They made a mistake, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm not. You want almost like Paul. You wanted to deny them.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever been in that situation?
It's hard for me to think of a person like that I place as that monumental of a structure that holds up a huge part of my life. Like, because I've never put anybody in front of my parents or my kids like that, you know. There were friends that betrayed me, or colleagues that betrayed me that I looked at as pillars, and when they did that, that was tough to deal with, because I've had I can't think of it. Very few people, I'm probably on one hand, who've eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house.
Right.
And one friend that I invited, because he was just him and his son, and I invited him, and then he ended up stabbing me in the back and making me a scapegoat. And that was a pillar for me. That was somebody that ride or die. I was always by his side. And I he went to Rio Doso and stayed at my parents' cabin, came and ate Thanksgiving. And then when he betrayed me like that, that was crushing. It was crushing because you lose faith in some of the maybe your beliefs. You're like, man, do I want to put myself out there and believe in this in one person, or do you just place faith in just yourself? And
it's true.
You go
It's
at
true.
it that way.
I think that's a good example, John. Like I think with the friends and stuff, because pillars don't have to be as big as the pillar that's holding up the building. There's small pillars that are holding up the fence, right? Like a structural piece to the. And so I think that ultimately there's been pieces like that. And what you said when you brought that up about a friend, that really hit me. In that, I had a friend that was like a pillar, and shit went awry, and all of a sudden there wasn't a pillar there. And those are tough situations. And I like what you said, John, is that I think it's kind of weird as shit. Is we walk very parallel lives, and it's a weird deal because, believe it or not, we have very similar personalities. I was telling Michael this, in the sense that I think we're very like once we have a friend, we're like 100% down. We're expecting almost like gang member loyalty, and then they don't give it to us, and then we're kind of like, whoa, but we don't eat the shit sandwich. We're like, all right, then we're not going to play in that sandbox anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one thing that I like, and that's what I was kind of telling you, Nikki, coming here, is that's the kind of people that I'm looking for in my life. Is that me? If I'm a pillar in your life, I don't care what is said. I don't sway. Mm-hmm. If I've been a pillar in your life, I'm going to stay strong as I can, and I'm going to hold that foundation so that if you need to lean up against that pillar, I'm going to be there. And that's why I'm a pillar for very few people, because that's a lot of responsibility, right? Like that pillar has a lot of responsibility. And I think that's it. Nikki, have you ever had a person like that maybe made a mistake, and then they wanted to crucify him?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was I kept wanting to go back to my grandpa because he was like a pillar in the family. But like really, when I really think about it, my boxing coach, Pat, he was a pillar, and it was crazy because it was such a duality of a life. Like here was this person that taught me, structure in a sense of construction, which got me in my field, taught me structure in sports. He was very structured in that way, but he was like almost like a dad figure that I never had, right? But yet he was such a bad boy. And so there was times in the life where he went away to prison for 5 years, and everybody just wanted me to like shun him. And I didn't. I wrote him. I honored him because his life choices didn't change what he
had done for
what he done for me, And it's so funny because like I always looked up to him, even though some of the things I always picked and choose what felt good, right? But later when he got out, when I went to see him, he thought I was gonna treat him different, right? He thought I was gonna like back off of him or like, whatever. And I was just like, you did it, you made it out, And here's this guy that went from literally prison to Phi Theta Kappa. This guy didn't even know how to use a computer. I had to show him how to like where the button was turned on. Yeah. He didn't even know how to use the keyboard, nothing. And here he was in college, literally on like the highest honors, the dean's list and all this stuff. But I was there for him. Like he would call me because he wouldn't understand words or things, and I'd show him how to look him up on the internet. So like no matter what happened and what I chose, because there was stuff I chose in life that he didn't disagree on, but he loved me unconditionally. And there was a lot of stuff he did in his affiliation that I didn't agree on, but I loved him unconditionally. And here we are, we have met up later in life, and I'm still a pillar for him, and he's still a pillar for me. And so like no matter, our lives are so different and our beliefs are so different, our heart and our core and our character, like we stayed true. It's like that's my people, right? Like he would call me right now, I'm there for him, right? I'd call him right now, he's there for me. But I didn't agree with stuff and he didn't agree with me, but it never swayed how much I genuinely cared for him. So like that's one person that I could say is still to this day right now is one of like my pillars. I mean, he might have a couple of chips on his wood, but like I definitely honor him. Like he's actually reminds me, there's a lot of traits that remind me of you. Like no matter where he was and where he was at financially in his construction business, he always took care of the people, and he always took the time to listen to someone. He didn't care about their title. Like he saw the human. And like that's one thing that like titles, I feel like a lot of people made me a pillar in their life because of my titles, right? When I was a boxer, like I had to live up to that. When I was this and that, I had to live up to that. But when I was at my down points in life, like who was there for me? Like who actually still loved me for like my heart? And those friends are still my friends to this day. Like I was like, you have to meet the new me. They're all we know the real you. And it makes me laugh because it's true. Like
there's nothing new.
There's nothing new.
But I think sometimes, Nikki, like in society, we're put to want to be a pillar because they think that's kind of a sexy thing. But when, like John pointed it out, you're actually load bearing all the weight.
Yep.
And so, like, I never signed up to be a pillar. Right? I don't want to load weight, but I just end up doing it. I think that ultimately in our lives, we and I think this goes back to like judgment, right? In the sense that if we truly live life the way it's supposed to be lived, we should have no judgment, period. We know what's right from wrong. We can look at that. But ultimately, we're just trying to make things better. And I think that as long as we're making things better, that's really the key. I think that ultimately, systemically, when we look at a person, like for me, like with Mick, right? I'm like, man, this guy came out from Ukraine, built a Tao Spa, had Benjamin Bratt in there, had Julia Roberts, all these famous people, had a second gym that was with celebrities, makes a mistake, he gets himself involved with drugs, and everyone's like, oh no. And it was crazy to me because so many people turned on him, but when he was a superstar, everybody was there. And I think for what I look at is that the people that are really going to be there for you is that if you're calling somebody a pillar and all of a sudden small words, that's why I put in here, right? Not a small rainstorm or strong wind is going to move it. Can be moved, right? So I think one of the things is, for me, is how can we sit there and say, well, they were a pillar for me there, like for example, like Mick inside the gym world. What the fuck does that have to do with anything else?
Yeah.
Right? That has nothing to do with the life choices he made. I'm talking about the gym pillar, not his whole life. And how many times I think one of the things that we hold really bad to, and I think this is like sometimes even like presidents, right? Or even people that are in high power, they're doing 97% of their job, and then something happens, and all of a sudden we forget everything they actually did because we're looking at a mistake or something dumb. And it's like, that's just so stupid, because what happened to the laws of average, right? Averaging out what it really is. We can take and say someone could do 1,000 good things, make 2 mistakes, and all of a sudden the 1,000 things they did erased. I mean, what kind of math is that? Wouldn't you say, John?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I don't know if you watch Shameless, because there's actually an episode in the final season that's sort of about this, and it has to do with, schools changing their names, and in the fiction show, there was an elementary school named after Dennis Hastert. He was the Speaker of the House in Chicago. He, very powerful man, brought lots of money back to Chicago. But then later on in life, people find out that he's a sex offender, that he was a wrestling coach, and that he did inappropriate things to 14 kids. So they took the name away from him, and Frank, who very much, he's sort of the ideological center of the group. And, he doesn't want to see things change. So he was advocating for it to stay that name because of all the positive things he did. So but I think there's an ultimate line in the sand where you can be like, okay, we can't revere that person. And the show actually does a good job of saying, the kid, one of the most intelligent kids on the show, he's like, everybody's fucked up in their past. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, you think of they've done great things, but if you dig up every inch of their life, they've made mistakes. We're all human, so to revere people, it's tough, because at some point you're going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're going to offend somebody, and you're going to hurt a group of people. And just like you said, are the positives that you've done outweighed by these negative things?
I think one of the crazy thing is, like, John, I think I've met a lot of, this is not to anybody, but a lot of people recognize me either from social media or like events. But like my mind, I think I meet so many people that I don't do it on purpose, where I don't recognize you, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the craziest things ever, and I think about this, John, you could have taken this all personal. We're sitting there and said, dude, I've been to the Man Cave multiple times. Like, I know I met John like once or twice. And like, no, I met you more times. And it's like in that moment, you think, well, it's not against you, right? What you person doesn't understand, or shit, my mind's not even been in my place. But I think one of the craziest things in life to me is like one moment you're like great, great, great. Then someone you do barely one something, and all of a sudden, oh no, he's an asshole, right? And I think that in that level, if that can change so fast, I guess what I want to talk about today is that be careful who you actually think are actually a pillar, and then a small win can actually move their opinion about yourself. And do you really want a weak pillar holding up your roof, right? So it's very careful where you place a pillar, and it's very careful what type of pillar. And then if you want to talk to human capital, it's very, very, very important that you're placing important people that you know are going to hold up your roof if you're calling them a pillar. Because, I mean, think about that. How important is that, right?
Yeah.
Even with the friends, like, I mean, John, think about that with you, how these friends let you down, and even the bullshit that they pulled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty tough. And we've been there. But sometimes you've done all the empirical data and they still turn out to be bullshit. It's not your fault because you gave it your all.
Yeah. And intellectual maturity becomes a huge part of it, because I remember in my 20s, and even though I waited till I was like 26 and 27 to have my first child, you know, I still envied my single friends that were able to go on trips and do things and go to lakes and do all these things, and then I have a newborn at home, and I couldn't do those things with them. But then now my 40-year-old, 50-year-old mind now is like, I don't care if I miss those things. I much more value time with my kids. But it's amazing how our mind evolves, and wisdom that we gain, you know, how much it changes us, and how much you know, we reflect on things. And it's just, you know, wisdom's a powerful thing, you know, and, you know.
Wouldn't it be crazy if we could just take wisdom, write a program, you come out 18 years old and just input it?
Yeah, plop
Yeah.
it into it. You know, but that's the tragedy of youth, is that most times you have amazingly wise people around you, but an adolescent mind says, I can do it. I can do it on my own. You know, and a lot of times the people that love them the most, they don't listen to them. Sometimes they'll listen to a coach or listen to a teacher or something like that. And they've been saying the same things that their parents have saying, but it's just that part of the frontal lobe that just doesn't fully develop till it's 25, or for some people, never, you know, that they never ever accept that wisdom or accept that, and just saying, oh, you know what? You know, I mean, my youngest is ridiculously smart, and he's a great kid, but there's times like I'll tell him things, and, you know, I can see him blow it off. So then I'll be like, okay, Google. And then I'll be like, and he'll look at it, and I'm like, same fucking thing I just said.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just, so it's a second source that he can see it. He's like, well, I believe you. And I go, well, you just shrugged me off though.
Yes.
You know, so, you know, you may not be, and that's, you know, you know, seeing things and touching them and doing those things are all integral parts of learning. And I find myself doing that with especially my youngest. You know, I'm like, dude, you have to do this. You know, like now with him, because he broke his collarbone, you know, him repairing it, and the doctor says you have to have high amounts of vitamin D. And I said, well, you know what? The best vitamin D you can do is getting out in the sun. And he kind of just blew me off. So I said, okay, Google, what's the best sort of vitamin D? It says it right there. So I'm like, get your ass out in the sun, you know, so that you can get that bone growing back stronger. But when I said it, he didn't rely on my wisdom, you know.
Yes.
And he does a lot, but there's times that he doesn't. So.
What do you know what's crazy, I think? And then there's a situations like, I think with you, Nikki, where you actually wanted the guidance, but the guidance wasn't there for you, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it an oxymoron?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
So
what I
think-
was just thinking in my head.
Yeah,
whole
the
time.
frontal lobe's there, and you're thinking, shit, I wanted to have John as a, like, kind of my dad.
Mhm.
You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah.
But that's reflecting as you're older and saying, God, I would have loved to have had that. But at the time, if it was there in your face, who knows how you'd have reacted.
But you know,
Go ahead.
I mean, you know what's crazy, John? I can actually tell you about that. So I think like myself, like my parents and the structure that they told me and the stuff that they were telling me, I don't think I ever took it that way. I actually took the wisdom immediately. Like when my mom sat me down and said, you know what, son, when you grow up in life, the majority of how they're going to judge you is by the amount of money you make. That's exactly what she told me. Hardcore bash. That's when she took out the $5, $10, $20 and all that. And I was like, you know what? This lady's right, because what I've been experiencing at school, no matter what I try to do to be a pleaser or this, They're still picking on me. They're doing this. The hell with that. I'm going to focus on myself. And so it was crazy that I did listen to wise people along the way. And I think that's what actually forged me to be so successful at such a young age.
If that's what happens, then definitely.
You know what I mean?
Oh no, that to me, that's the formula for success.
Yeah.
You know, and for 23 years, I've been telling my students, hey, you may not want to listen to your parents, but find some adult to listen to. And as a coach, I used to tell the parents, your kid wants an adult in their life. They just don't want it to be you. They just don't want you nagging them. You know, and yes, there are aberrations that are people that do listen to their parents, but that's why I think it's so valuable for a kid to be involved in something extracurricular, something that's different, whether it be a guitar teacher, or whether it be a tutor, or whether it be a coach that provides that mentorship for them, that gives them that parental wisdom without being a parent.
I also think it's not what's said, but it's how it's said.
Mm-hmm.
I've known a couple of teachers where I know their intention towards me was good.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's just a culture, but it was very belittling. So I was just like, well, I hear what you're saying, but the way you're saying it to me.
Can you share that with us, Nikki? Like the exact words that you can remember?
Yeah. So one of my basketball coaches, Debbie Salazar, was extremely mean to me. And instead of her encouraging me, she used to make me stand out in front of the gym and be like, don't do what Nikki did. Don't do this. Like, she would shun me, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of like guiding me, right? So in class, instead of her giving me the ability to prove myself, she sat me next to her by her desk and she watched my every move. So I never got to show, because she never knew me. She was mean to me before she was my coach, and she was mean to me before she was my teacher, right? And so she was judging me on a perception of a reputation that I had, and that was for fighting and stuff like that. But a lot of people didn't know I was the fighter who I was because I was bullied. I was extremely bullied. I didn't go and beat up people. I protected people, right? There was a big difference in a lot of people. So when the 7th and 8th grade would play, she would like use me as a bad example. And if I would say something, like, even if like a frustration thing, she'd make me run laps. Like, she never let me, I was like afraid to express myself. Yeah. So when I had her as my science teacher, I was like, oh man, before I even got there, before I even sat in the class, I was sitting next to her, right? And like, she was just extremely hard for me. So when I was actually her coach, when she was my actual coach, it was super hard, because her guidance was just like very destructive in a sense, and not like a guidance, right?
Negative reinforcement.
Yes.
But it was very negative. What's your take on that, John? I mean, you're a teacher. What do you think about that? It was the real deal.
Well, I mean, I think in the past, I know I've definitely been guilty of that too, you know, not to the point of that to me, that's
that magnitude.
That's emotional terrorism. That it really is. But I've been tough on kids. I remember one kid was like even kids like spoke frankly. He's all, "Are you ever not a smart ass?" And I go, "Well, it's better than being a dumbass." I told him, you know. But it was always real tough for me for kids, and I a lot of times I tried to use a little bit of sarcasm, you know, and you have to have a higher level of intelligence to appreciate sarcasm. And even to understand it, versus the way you don't even interpret it. So, but I think, you know, teachers and coaches and mentors, they evolve over time and hopefully get a lot better. And hopefully that coach got out of that profession or whatever, or became a better person and realized that wasn't the path. But see, that's just it, is all kids are different. Some kids can deal well with negative reinforcement. Others kids have to be coddled. Others have to be spoken to a different way. You know, everybody comes, and that's just it, is, you know, emotional and social learning we're all different. Yeah. You know, we've all been, we're like a plant. We've all been fertilized different. We've all been watered different, and we all didn't grow the same, you know? So the emotional social toll that, well, you know, you don't know what's happened in the past and how they're going to react to you. You know, that's why kind of as a teacher and a coach, you have to kind of feel out, okay, what's going to be best for this kid? Yeah. You know,
and I don't want to dishonor her, because she was actually one of the best coaches I ever had. And she was tough with everybody. but her toughness was different with me.
Yeah.
But I had several teachers like that. And so it was really weird how I developed to become who I am, because all of my guidance and all of the people that looked, it was so tough love that like I never it was always like I was walking on eggshells, you know? So like, is this good enough? Like, am I, you know, especially in college and stuff like that. So it's really funny how when I reflect back, like I am who I am because like I never knew if I was okay, because no one ever gave me like, hey, you're doing good. It was more of like it was the opposite, like, well, you could do this, right? So it's kind of interesting to see how I've kind of navigated, because I think anybody else would have definitely could have steered in a different direction.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I don't know the exact percentage, but the psychological thing that came out and said that humans only, it was like 8% or 6% of humans can actually grow with negative reinforcement. It's a very low percentage.
Yeah.
It actually, there was a site, I think it was at Stanford, where it showed that people that are actually messed with like that, they can't grow their full potential because they're kind of screwed up, right?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that situation when you're talking about, Nikki, like coming out, me working with you, where you need that validation, or you think that I do good, or am I doing this? But you did. And it's crazy because I was telling you, I was met with one of the guys that I'm going to bring on the podcast that used to work for me. And I actually kicked the shit out of him within the office and bad. And he says, you know, he told me one of the greatest things you did for me, Jen, was like your level of tough love was pretty much the only real love I ever had in my life. That was pretty powerful words, right? And I'm thinking about that because he says you actually care. And I think that what ends up happening with that kind of situation, I personally thrive in trying to be a leader who like focuses on your positive and saying we're going to work on this, and then I kind of lay the law. Like there's no, I'm not like, oh, you suck, let me show you, like, you know what I mean? I'll say, look, this isn't working, we got to get this done because this doesn't make any sense. But I mean, Nikki, I mean, you've been around me long. I mean, how would you say that, am I on par or am I off the chain? I don't care.
No,
I mean, give me the truth.
It's so crazy because I didn't really, what's cool, I think I have a little advantage because I didn't really know you social media wise before. Like we randomly met in person, and I get really excited like for the podcast that you were just on with Brian, because hearing your story, it's so valid. Like you are such a good person, and no matter your money, your state, like you're generally like such a solid human. And I feel like working with you, I've never had something so solid. Like I just took off and I worked. This was so crazy because like I had like moments of like panics where I'm like, oh my gosh, I was only supposed to be gone a week and I've been gone over a month, and am I out of the crew? Like I started having these things, but then I'm like, no, like I'm in Jack's camp in a boat that is indestructible.
Yeah.
And my weight doesn't sway the boat. It just adds something to the boat. And so like, that was something that I had to like mentally grasp. And I've never had that before because I've had to just battle my whole life. And it's like, you're so solid in a friendship. And I ask you a question that you're going to tell me it just straight up. You don't cookie cutter it. It's just like, you're so real. And that's such a rare thing that you can find in humans these days. Because I feel like we live in a world now where people like filter everything. Like they try to make it pretty, or they try to make it something and not like fucking raw.
And that was what John was saying this morning. John told me, he says, you know what? He goes to his boss now and it's like, whoa, but you're doing good, but don't worry. And that's like, well, and he's like, I know that I'm fucking up and I'm pushing this thing. And it was like, you're not telling me that, versus like you, it's within a second. You're like, you're fucking up. This is why, this is what we got to do to get better. We can't have this happen. And it's done, because I think that at the end of the day, what we're looking for in society and as humans is that transparency.
Yeah.
And we're not like sitting there guessing, well, where do I stand? Or is the boat moving, or like whatever. And it's like, I think what you realize about me, I tell people this in a positive way. It's not a negative way. This ship is running at the certain pace that it is in the ocean. With or without you, the ship, it doesn't stop. You bring value, might be a better flag, it might be this, but the bones and the structure of the ship are running. They were built by me. I'm 90% of my ship, then I allow the 10%. And that's what a lot of individuals today don't have. you have to say, ask yourself, and I talk about the freedoms, right? But let's rethink about it for today's podcast. Where's your physical pillar? Where's your mental pillar? Where is your spiritual pillar? What's your financial pillar? Do you really have that? Have you sourced it out? Or are you there? And I think that's one of the things that people make the biggest mistake, is that those pillars aren't in their life, or they haven't searched for the right pillar. And sometimes it doesn't have to be human capital, right? One of the greatest things ever that I heard of the twins, I don't know if you guys have all heard about the Salsa twins from El Pinto. And I love those guys, man. We've been working for them, actually became really good friends of these guys. And they say your number one resource is your social capital and your network and the people you have in your life. And it's true, because you watch those guys, they never eat alone. They have their restaurant. It's so awesome. But like people that are gravitating to them. And even with myself, they've earned such a loyalty from me that I'll do anything for those guys to help them. So it's like, he's right. You build that capitalism, it's unstoppable, right? You really start to say, wow, you value the friendship, you all that, but that also come alive. But I think we're looking for such artificial pillars in our lives that they're not there.
Yeah.
And
Now that you just said that, it made me think that for people, say, that struggle with coping, that's maybe struggle with narcotics or alcohol, struggle with some mental problems, struggle with domestic violence or any of those things, are they lacking those pillars in their life? I mean, you look at people that fall down and don't get up, or that struggle, they don't have those pillars in their life. They don't have somebody that's always holding them up no matter what, and, I know there's been plenty of times that I've made mistakes, and I look back at my parents and my kids, and those pillars have always kept me from going down the wrong path. I had an uncle that was an alcoholic, and I've had other people that have come across my past that I see that they struggle and they lack those pillars, and it becomes, the weight is too much and there's nothing holding them up.
Yeah. I had a little epiphany of me growing up, kind of jumping on people's pillars. Just let me swim for a minute and hold on, because there's times in my life that I met people's pillars and we didn't have that personal connection, but I kind of ride the wave as long as I could until I made like the next jump. So it's like kind of funny, like you're literally probably the first solid pillar that I've ever had in my life. You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny how I picture me in the ocean, like seeing someone's pillared, and I just hold on just so I don't drown until I have enough air to go like to the next one. So it's so cool when you get like the two worlds. Like when I got into Jack's house, I'm like, this makes sense. Like looking at, like, he didn't have like, Nintendo stuff up on the thing. This dude had encyclopedias. Like this guy had such his own like kingdom in his house that was so structured, and his family, and you wash your hands when you get it, like just every little thing where it all made sense, and it's so cool that I get to see the results of all of that now, right? Like I'll sit with him in the man cave and I'm like, bro, how does it feel? And he's like, it feels good. But it's like, I try to tell the kids that were there, I'm like, those cars and this building wasn't built off of like a lottery ticket. This dude, I'm telling you, okay, so like there's days where I'm tired and I'm like, Jack's probably doing something right now. And I always tell myself that, because I was ready to go to bed last night and I had a bunch of orders for my business. And I was like, no, like Jack, it's structure, right? So I've been really trying to be more disciplined, because this guy not only runs this business, he's also, the cleaning of the offices, the yards, the fences. He still makes time to go to like these charitable events and make time for people. We have a photo shoot this coming weekend for a senior, like all these little things. And I'm like, and that's just one thing he does is harmonics. It doesn't even like surface like how deep of like a multi-talented, diverse man this is, but yet he's so consistent, but his productivity is like superhuman. Like, and so whenever I catch myself slipping, I'm like, no, that's a mindset. Like it's not that I'm slipping. Like, it's just like, I can't fall back like that. So it's really cool to have a human to like, be like, it's doable. Like when you see it, right? Cause you hear stories, but when I'm in the family and I see the structure of him, it just all makes sense. Like it's a consistent effort over time. That's really it. And it's incredible because I used to hear that quote when I was younger and I was selling Rev, and it was consistent effort over time. And it was like our slogan, and we'd always repeat it. And like, they would always be like, if you can consistently do this, you'll get the results, right? And like, that's just you. You were so consistent.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it, guys, like even for myself, like I can even feel overwhelmed. You know, Sunday I was almost gonna have a mental breakdown for myself because I saw the structure and I was like, fuck, I'm not doing this stuff right. I haven't finished this house project. I haven't finished this. And you know, it's crazy because at that moment I pulled back, right? And I said, what got me here? And it was the list. Because if you have so much shit going on and you don't do it, so I started, your mind will wander off. Well, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. And so I started putting down the list, and it was crazy because I was so focused when I came in on Monday. I started hammering shit down. And by here we are Tuesday, and now they're already trenching the trench for the wall. Have to call the neighbors to knock down their fence. Have a deal that's about to close. The unit's all about to go to install. It's going to affect your guys' lives financially. Put money more in our pocket. I'm like, I'm going to close this. I got concrete guys when they finish harmonics, the gates. We got to get, stuff. And so what I learned is that I learned for myself that those structures of my structure of discipline and that like consistency is a monster pillar in my life. My religious faith, why it's a pillar in my life. That stuff over and over. And, I think one of the things what made me so like regimented, and you said that's so crazy because like my mom, once you walk in, wash your hands, right? Boom. So when you think about all that structure is why, and look how successful I've been, right? When you walk into my house and you step in there, you don't see chaos, right?
No, at all.
Right? Even when your niece was like, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
She's looking around and everything there's no chaos. People are like, oh, I like to build character in my house and I do this. And it's like this fucking multiple things of disaster. I said, no, everything in my house is consistent. There's one paint through the entire place. Mm-hmm. You're right. That's a lot of wall space, right? Everything is unified. And I think that I love that about myself. And I'm like, I don't want anything clogging my mind. So you can take your pillar and start putting a bunch of holes in it and adding all kinds of picture frames. And then all of a sudden you weaken that pillar, right? Yeah. And I think we got a little bit off what we're talking about. This is good stuff, Nikki, because what I want listeners out there to really understand is that you don't need a bunch of pillars in your life. There could be one main pillar that holds it up. But as you start to evolve, find that financial pillar, that person who really knows finances, that doesn't want to see you fail, that's been a pillar in finance, is proven and tested through storms, rain, and all that, and earns the right to be a pillar, not a bullshitter. And so in order for you to be a pillar, you better be standing for 100 years. Well, obviously a human's not going to be living for 100 years, but you've done 100 things great, right? 100 transactions at least. Good. Physically, same thing. You see someone who's a pillar in physical, you're like, wow, they've been consistent for these years. For me, it's Michael Hearn. You've heard me mention him multiple times. Same thing. You say, man, what does that guy do? I don't give a damn. You watch some of his stuff and people are hating, oh, that's what Trenabal does, or all these fancy names, and I'm Googling them. And it's like this, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Could you be there where you're at? No. And I think that ultimately is we got to be careful what pillars you have, because they might not be able to sustain the weight or roof or building that you want, and they're going to collapse. And then your dream's going to collapse with them. So you get those pillars, but what you're ultimately going to do is you're going to take that type of material and you're going to build yourself as the ultimate pillar. So you're taking that knowledge of that, and ultimately, when you're that old fuck and you're sitting there, you should be such a structural pillar that it doesn't matter. And that's what I really commend myself, and what I always say is that people's opinions can't be cashed at the bank.
Yep.
John said it this morning. He says, General, you really don't give a shit what people think on us. I said, I don't. It doesn't affect me. I know what's right, what's wrong, and I'm going to do what's right, and I'm going to do it because it's right, not because someone's watching. Right? When that whole thing happened for Sagebrush for Easter, for Good Friday, and I was like, what, I need to do something. And everyone's like, oh, no, they're sending the food to somewhere else. Is it really going to? And I'm thinking, why am I going to let your words? I don't give a fuck if they're throwing it in the Rio Grande. I know that my intention's there. And so I'm going to do it. So I'm not going to let anyone shade my mind. And that's what I've learned, that I stand as a monster pillar, a pillar in my own life, right? My mom was a pillar in my life, right? Anna Miller was a pillar in my life. Mick, Al, Luke. But even them, some of their preconceived notions weren't good for me. So they were pillars in how the level of your building is. And now I'm a pillar. I'm the main pillar in my life. And so I don't need anything to hold me besides myself. And that's the message that I wanted to get out today, is that if there's pillars in your life that were pillars, don't let a small wind, rainstorm shade that pillar. Be proud. Stand by them, because now they need you to maybe be the pillar for them. So that's what I wanted to get out. But ultimately, what I want you to do in life, and this podcast, is I want you to work on being the biggest pillar for yourself, where you're so strong that you can hold the biggest roof you possibly could have, right? And in biblical terms, talking about the temple is you. Treat yourself good. Tell yourself great things. Nourish yourself. Don't destroy your body. Don't chip away at the pillar. And so call it a pillar, call it a temple. Bottom line, you have to be the biggest pillar in your own life. So reinforce that. So that's the truth. We'll catch you guys next week. And sorry for missing you guys the last 2 weeks, but just want to get that message. And thank you guys for listening. Hope all is well, guys.
Thanks.
Harmonix Technologies, your New Mexico business IT solution. With incredible products that will fit your needs both big and small, and unmatched service, it's your vision delivered. Learn how we can help your business roar into action today. Harmonix Technologies, your New Mexico business IT solution.